Welcome into Payoff Pitch, Action Network's baseball betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Our division previews continue. National League West. Very excited to talk about this one. A lot of movement by one team in particular in the offseason. Brendan Glasheen, Sean Zerillo, Anthony DeBundo. Good to have you with us. During the season, you can follow Payoff Pitch Podcast. Search it in the Action Network app. We have an account that is dedicated to the pod when we give out picks. More info on that as the season nears. Also, our MLB off-season betting update episode is available. Sean Zerillo, Colin Whitchurch break down some of the new rule changes and some potential edges early on when the season begins in April. So, National League West, Dodgers. You both have a lot of thoughts on this team. Dodgers are minus 120 to win the NL West this year. Their win total at BetMGM set at 96.5. Last year, Dodgers won 111 games. They were knocked out of the playoffs early, falling short. They soared over their projection of 98.5 wins. Dodgers they're always there. They're always right in the mix. But I'm curious now with the Padres improving, which we'll get to them. What kind of angles, Zerillo, and I know DeBundo, I think, has similar thoughts. You have some angles in terms of how you want to fade the Dodgers this year.
I do, and I think there's one way in particular that is better than the others. I would lean to the under on their win total, but it's not personally a bet for me. I made it 95.7. The market is at 96.5. Zips is at 88.3, so they would certainly recommend an under. And when Fangraphs is that far away from a win total, I think it tends to be right. I actually have a plan to go back and go through all of these different projection systems and see when they have an outlier projection to that degree, when it's, 8 wins off from a win total, how successful the individual systems are, or if taking the average, which is usually how I do it, is still the best approach. And taking the average, the market still likes the under by about 2.2 wins here, including my projection. If you just look at Davenport, Bakota, Fangraphs, it's under by 3.7. So you can go under on the Dodgers at about 96.5, 97. I would personally prefer about 97.5 or higher if I'm going to bet they're under. And again, we talked about this on the NL East podcast as well with a team like the Mets. Not too many people are coming in and betting the under on the Dodgers season win total. Maybe that'll change this year with the way Anthony and I and perhaps other people are seeing this stack up, but I don't think this number is going to go down. I think it goes up, if anything. So wait until closer to opening day if you like the Dodgers under and consider betting it. The thing is, this team could have won 116 games last year. That was their Pythagorean total. And with a little bit of luck, that means they could have broken the single season wins record. So that's still a big fall to take, but their roster does not stack up anywhere near what it did going into last year. So yes, it's a lean under for me. I think there is a better way to bet against them. We will get to that in a second, but I believe Anthony and I are on a similar page with being down on the Dodgers this year.
Yeah, DeBundo's got a column up right now, win total picks. He highlights 4 teams: Marlins, White Sox, D-backs, and the Dodgers. They're the last team in the article. And I think the word you used, DeBundo, is vulnerable. This is a vulnerable baseball team. You like the win total under. Why?
I mean, if you just look at the roster, the opening day team from last year to the opening day team this year, they lost their starting shortstop to free agency. They lost their starting third baseman to free agency. They lost their starting center fielder to a non-tender. And who's the big signing? JD Martinez is probably, the one key add. And Martinez, I expect a bounce back from him, but he was not peak JD Martinez last season in Boston. A slight downgrade in hitting environment for him too. So, what kind of JD Martinez are we going to get? I don't know. They lose Gavin Lux for the season to an ACL injury just last week, which is a huge loss. I think they're turning to Miguel Vargas at second base. I don't know how good he's going to be defensively at second base. I think that's a major concern. Max Muncy at this stage of his career at third base is a big red flag for me. Trace Thompson in center. Like, these are all, like, Miguel Vargas is a rookie. I like him long-term, but, as a rookie, like, what's his real upside? I'm not sold on him overall as like being anything more than just like a slightly above league average hitter. Left field, David Peralta's fine. but not moving the needle. So I think there's just like a lot of league average positions in a lineup for a team that's supposed to win 96 plus games, that would have to win, that to get over. So I did bet the under for the Dodgers. It's never fun, but even the pitching, I trust them. They're a bit of a pitching factory in terms of finding guys and fixing them and whatnot. The latest project is Noah Syndergaard. The reports are that he's got more velo out of spring training. I want to see that before I believe that. If he doesn't find at least 2 or 3 ticks minimum, he had one of the worst fastballs in the league last year and got hit pretty hard most of the season. So I think, Syndergaard as a back end starter is shaky. Clayton Kershaw is great when he pitches, but again, can you count on him for more than 120 innings? I wouldn't. So you look at this rotation, Tony Gonsolin, we've talked about as a negative regression candidate on this show since this show began. Now he doesn't get the shift as much. And like I said, the infield defense, like Miguel Rojas, probably the shortstop every day right now for them. So you're looking at an infield of Miguel Vargas, Miguel Rojas, Max Muncy. Like how many, they're not getting plus overall production probably at, 2.5 of those positions. So I just think there's a lot of holes. And the name brand of the Dodgers is very good, but this win total isn't that much different than what they were last season. And so I'm going to go under, even though last year's team overperformed massively. Look at the contributions they got from Andrew Heaney, Gonsolin, Trey Turner. All of them are gone. And so I think there's going to be a drop off for sure.
And Dodgers can't shift that defense either.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And they've got a new shortstop in Rojas, right? And he will not participate in the World Baseball Classic, which we talked about on the Action Network podcast, the WBC preview. So Rojas is prioritizing his new role. But I'm glad you brought up Syndergaard. Zerillo, that was one of our favorite guys to talk about last year.
Yeah, he's certainly hopped teams. We ended up betting on him, I believe, in the playoffs. We also bet his strikeout total under, which was delightful. I believe they set that at 3.5 in a game where he was clearly not going to go more than 2 innings. And he got to 2 in the first inning and we were all sweating it. So that was a fun bet in the playoffs last year. It was an adventurous season with Noah Syndergaard, lots of ups and downs, but I'm curious to see what the Dodgers do, because the Dodgers do not make dumb signings. They're a pretty smart baseball team. And it did catch my attention when they signed Noah Syndergaard, because that to me said, okay, maybe there's something left in the tank that we're all missing. We'll see what they're able to get out of him. I don't doubt the Dodgers in their player development.
I mean, he has good command and a bunch of pitches. But if you don't have a fastball, how good can you be? But if he has the fastball back, he is further and further from Tommy John. So there's a chance he gets a couple ticks back instead of sitting 93, it's 95. That's interesting. But I'll be a skeptic until he proves otherwise, for sure. And I'm sure we'll be betting against him plenty this season. But we'll see what the numbers look like when he gets in front of the radar guns.
Well, real quick before we move on, reportedly Syndergaard, he hasn't been throwing all that hard here in spring training. It's been 91, 92, maybe 93. So take that for what it's worth. And with the clock too, right? I mean, Zerillo brought that up on the preseason pod. You can't rev back when you're on a clock. You get it right back on the rubber and throw. But anyway, that's enough Noah Syndergaard discussion. I just get excited when it makes me think about October again and fading him during the season.
It was under 3.5, and he struck out Acuna to get to 3, and then Thompson pulled him, thankfully, because I was sweating that one.
I believe he struck out the first 2 hitters of the game, or he struck out 2 in the first inning as well. He struck out I know he struck out Acuna to start the game. So,
Okay, where to start with the Padres? San Diego making a ton of moves in the offseason. They land Bogarts, Nelson Cruz, Carpenter, Lugo, Waka. They've got some. They've loaded up, right? They've spent a lot of money. They give Machado the extension. They're at plus 115 at BetMGM to win the NL West. BetMGM win total set at 93.5. Last year, Padres won 89 games, and they went just a sliver over their projection of 88.5. Zerillo, as you adhered to, your way of fading the Dodgers is to jump in on the Padres. How will you do so?
Yeah, I'm about a win low on the Dodgers win total relative to the market, and about a 1.5 high on the Padres. So I essentially make this division a pick 'em. Plus 115 is about where I'd bet it down to. That's roughly where I would have it projected. I just think once the Padres get Joe Musgrove back eventually after he probably misses a few starts with the broken toe, but then Tatis back after 20 games. I think this team is going to take off. So if they are a similar price or even short minus money because they built up a small lead by the time that those two were coming back, I would look to invest more in the Padres. But certainly right now, preseason, there's some numbers as high as plus 140 out there. Shop around for the best number. There's definitely some good prices available on the Padres. I was heavy on the Dodgers divisional odds last year. Their win total over 97 plus or 99 plus games. Really like the Dodgers last year. This year, I do think the teams are within a win of each other going into the season. Some projections like Zips, like the Padres, about 5 wins more than the Dodgers, and that was even before the Gavin Lux injury, I believe. Pacoda is about 3 wins higher on the Dodgers than the Padres. I still have the Dodgers as the second best team in the NL behind the Braves. I have the Padres right in between those two, or right below those two, I should say. On top of the Padres divisional bets, which I do think is the best way to fade the Dodgers and ride the Padres, I also like the Padres pennant and World Series bets as well, which correlate. I would have them, if they beat the Dodgers, finishing with the second best win total in the National League, which would mean they would get the bye. They would be 1 series closer to winning the pennant and obviously winning the World Series. So all of that correlates. I have, as we talked about on the NL East pod, pennant, World Series divisional bets on the Braves, but I like the same thing for the Padres. I just have a little bit more allocated to the Braves.
DeBundo, similar thoughts? See some value in the Padres if you're low on the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, it's kind of give and take, like Zerillo said. It's hard for me to get a grasp on what this team really is because I think there is one major question mark, and it is the status and health and ability of Fernando Tatis. He has not played baseball in a year and a half, and I'm worried about the shoulder. He's going to be playing a new position. It looks like he's going to play potentially corner outfield. So the defense could be a learning curve there, and that could be a problem. Of course, Tatis put up these incredible numbers, but when you combine, the wrist with the shoulder, I think you start to get into the point where sometimes, a player just never is quite the same, and that is absolutely a risk for a player like Tatis. And so I'm concerned about that. I think that is a big question mark. We just won't kind of know until he starts playing baseball again. And then even then, it might take him time, getting back. I mean, he was in the middle of rehabbing last year when he ultimately went down and got suspended. So I think that's the biggest question mark. Otherwise, it's hard to disagree with Sean. I mean, the bullpen looks excellent. Josh Hader had the blip last year, but looks like he's, found his form again toward the end of the season. Robert Suarez, one of the better setup men. The starting pitching has more depth this year because of Waka, Lugo, and Martinez, whereas last year, the 2 playoff games that really hurt them were, games started by Mike Clevenger and Sean Manaea, and they both got, kind of rocked in Philly, and then even against the Dodgers, they got rocked there. So I think having, capable guys to give you 3 or 4 innings in a playoff environment is more beneficial. So there's not a lot of holes, maybe like the back end of the lineup, like Ha-Seong Kim and Trent Grisham and Austin Nola are like kind of meh, like, you could poke holes, but like this is a better lineup than the Dodgers for sure. So, where are the Dodgers better this season than the Padres, Sean? Like, I don't think there's anywhere.
No, the Padres have more top end talent too. I reiterate it, but they have on a projected per inning basis the number 1 player in the National League in Juan Soto, the number 3 player in Fernando Tatis Jr. And then you go down the list, Machado's top 15, Bogarts is top 15. The top 4 in their lineup is basically what the Dodgers had last year. And then I think they have comparable depth to what the Dodgers had last year as well. So if this Padres team wins 100 games, I wouldn't be surprised at all. The one difference between the two teams is that the Dodgers have a little bit more top end talent in the high minors that they can either bring up or use for trades for other pieces. The Padres kind of emptied the system last year for Soto. So I don't think they're going to be able to improve as much in season as the Dodgers might be able to. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to matter, especially when you consider Tatis is like getting a free agent 20 games into the season.
Preller will sell off any of the other farm players they have left. They're gonna be finding players to trade them and flip them for who knows at the deadline. But yeah, I mean, I guess I would take probably Kershaw and Urias over the two starters at the top of the Padres rotation if they're healthy, but it's pretty much a coin toss.
Yeah, my knock on the Padres, they don't have a true ace, but beyond that, I think it's a great team.
All right, let's go to the Giants. The San Francisco Giants, they had a rough go of it last year. The Giants, got my doc here. Here we go. Giants plus 1,200 to win the NL West. They won 81 games last year. Their win total projection was at 85.5. So, I mean, not woeful, but underachieved. Their win total for 2023 at BetMGM is 80.5 wins. Zerillo, the Giants. I remember you talking about this team last year quite a bit, about how horrible they are defensively. What else about them? With that being said, what's the appropriate angle you'd like to take? How do you feel folks are valuing or not valuing the Giants?
They also had an awkward offseason as well. They tried to get Aaron Judge, tried to get Carlos Correa, missed out on both of those guys. There's a chance they could have had both, and we'd be talking about them as a serious contender. So
I totally forgot they were in on Judge.
It's amazing. I believe he was in San Francisco when he announced that he was going back to the Yankees. It seemed like it was coming down to the wire between the Giants and the Yankees. So yeah, unfortunate that the Giants weren't able to get him and sort of accelerate or stabilize the back end of this run that they've been on, accelerate the next run that they want to be on. They ended up signing Michael Conforto, so that's a bit of a speculative play. Guys like Mitch Haniger, Sean Manaea, who we just talked about, Ross Stripling added to the rotation as well. So I think the Giants sort of solidified and can continue what they've been doing the past few years. They're not going to get back, most likely, to that 100-win season that they had 2 years ago that came out of nowhere. And that was largely defensive driven. They were 11th in defensive runs saved that year. Last year, they were the worst defensive team in baseball, minus 53. That does not bode well for 2023 with the new rules without defensive shifting. The Giants were one of the first teams to really adopt shifting, which led in part to their World Series run and all of their success in the early mid 2000s. You may see them completely fall apart without that benefit of shift. So Zips likes the over. They have them at 84 wins. Everybody else kind of recommends a pass. I do trust the people there. I think they're really smart. The people running that front office, former Dodgers execs. I think the Giants are headed in the right direction just for this year. I don't really see them getting above a back end wild card spot. And even that might be a bit of a reach.
DeBundo, any interest in playing the Giants? Where do you look to with this team?
Yeah, I've got nothing. I think it's really interesting because they could be boom or bust. They're betting on some guys to have bounce back seasons. So, Brandon Crawford and Lamont Wade had like career years in 2021 and kind of carried them to, along with, like a Brandon Belt type, all their, platoony sort of everyday guys all had breakout seasons at the same time. And really were at the top end of their like percentile range of what you'd expect. And then all of them kind of flipped last year. I mean, Wade was terrible. Crawford was one of the worst shortstops in baseball and was defensively and at the plate 87 WRC plus. And then they went out and signed three huge question marks, but three players that I think are really interesting. Conforto hasn't played baseball in over a year, so that's a huge red flag. We don't know what we're going to get. He wasn't really a part of, the Mets at all. And then there was the training, the injury. Was he hurt? Was he not? He couldn't get rehab because of the lockout. So that was a huge thing. Like, we don't really know what we're getting from Conforto. What we do know is that he can be a well above average league hitter when he's right. And the same is true of Mitch Haniger, and the same is true of JD Davis. But Davis was battling injury for parts of last season as well. And he even talked about how the lockout hurt him in the offseason because he wasn't able to get the same kind of treatment and rehab that for his injury that he was dealing with. And Mitch Haniger missed about half the season. Not a great hitting environment for him, given his style, but he's still an above average hitter. So I think, those three guys plus Jock Peterson, like, they could all click, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Giants upwards closer to 90 wins. But there's also a world where these players who they bet on to, find resurgent years after down years, and, Wade, Crawford, Haniger, Conforto, and Davis just don't get there, and then they're much worse. So I think, net, it's probably right around even. They did lose Carlos Rodon. They added Sean Manaea. Manaea's looked great he's been like the buzz of spring training because he's throwing like 96 after he went to Driveline. And so He's got improved velocity, and the Giants have done a very good job of improving pitchers. They did it with Alex Cobb, and he improved last year. Ross Stripling is an interesting, back end of the starter rotation guy, but from a betting perspective, I think this number is right around where I would expect it to be. And I think they're going to end up fourth in the division more likely than not because of the team next that I love.
We didn't even talk about I was going to say,
Sean.
we didn't even talk about the guy who I think might be the best starting pitcher in the division, not Zach Gallen on the Diamondbacks, but Logan Webb on the Giants. I think at 40-1, Webb is potentially worth a Cy Young bet. My only concern is that the Giants defense might eat him alive. So Webb definitely underrated at that price point, just going to have horrible defense behind him.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly an angle to go to him, right? Because he's their guy with no Rodon. So if the Giants were to make any noise, Webb in all likelihood will be a huge catalyst for that at the head of that rotation.
Absolutely.
So let's go to Dabundo first, because again, I keep referencing the guys have great info up on the app and also on the website actionnetwork.com. Dabundo has a win total column up, and I mentioned a couple teams, I think White Sox, Dodgers, etc., just a couple more. But one of the other teams that he has on here is the Diamondbacks. And I found this really interesting, Dabundo, because you're not talking, you do get to these eventually, but your leadoff thought on this actually relates to the rule changes in Major League Baseball with the bigger bases and the pitch clock and guys running, stolen base attempts. They're up in spring training, and you're actually using that data to make a case for the Diamondbacks win total over. Explain.
Yeah, if you look at the projected team that they're going to be rolling out this year, they have about as much speed as anybody in baseball. Jake McCarthy, I know Sean has mentioned, we talked off air about him being a potential leader in the entire league in stolen bases. He projects for upwards of 25 stolen bases. Corbin Carroll, he's projected to hit third in this lineup potentially. Corbin Carroll is the rookie. He's one of the rookie year favorites in the National League. He is the fastest player in baseball by sprint speed. He doesn't have a ton of stolen base attempts, but there's no reason he couldn't steal more bases given his speed. And if you watch him run, it's really incredible. You think Trey Turner is cool to watch run. This guy's even faster. Carroll could steal, 20, 25 bases. And then you go down to Josh Rojas, who's the projected third baseman for this team. And he's a guy who could easily steal 20 again. So they have a ton of speed in this lineup. Alek Thomas, excellent defender, can also run a little bit too. And so for the fact that stolen bases are up pretty considerably thus far, attempts in spring training relative to last year's spring training gives me an indication that they're going to look to run. And I think they have a huge potential to steal a lot more bases. They were also one of the best defensive teams in the league last year. And Alek Thomas, Corbin Carroll, McCarthy, Rojas, Christian Walker at first base was a Gold Glove level first baseman last year. There's all kinds of reasons to think that they're going to be a great defense, even with the shift being taken away. So defense and speed, putting a ton of pressure on defenses and opposing teams. I think that's going to be a huge advantage. And then the other reason I'm really high on Arizona, I don't necessarily think the lineup is particularly deep. I love the back end of this rotation. They have three pitchers who I think will all pitch for the Diamondbacks in 2023. And I think they're all underrated by the projection systems for various reasons. Brandon Pfaadt is the guy who's getting the most juice out of spring training. He has a fastball that would rate, based on the StatCast numbers, the machines he's pitched in front of in spring training, it would rate as a top 10 fastball in baseball. And then he has a slider that would be the fifth best slider in baseball by spin rate and stuff plus. That's really impressive. And then you look at his numbers in AAA last year. He threw 167 innings across two different levels, AA, AAA. He gave up a ton of homers, but also had really impressive strikeout minus walk rates. You have to remember, he played in Reno in AAA. It's the PCL. There's just a ton of homers there. He throws a lot of high fastballs. If they get hit, they go and they leave the yard. It's just a really hard hitting pitching environment in those leagues, the upper levels in Arizona. And now he goes to Arizona, where it's a pretty depressed hitting environment. And I think if he keeps the ball in the yard, he's going to be really, really good, and potentially could, pitch to a, mid 3 ERA. He also threw 167 innings last year, so I'm not worried about him getting capped. So there's him, Dre Jameson, and Ryan Nelson are pitchers we saw last year too. Both of them, Nelson more stuff. Jameson has a bunch of different pitches, both impressive in their limited samples that they pitched, graded out well. Like I said, the minor league numbers were not that great on either, but again, it's the PCL. The homers are just insane there. So, I think that they have a good chance to pitch really well. And those three plus Gallen, Bumgarner, Kelly makes for a really deep and really underrated rotation. So pitching, defense, speed, a little bit of pop in the lineup. I love the Diamondbacks over. A little bit too much. I'm starting to get nervous that it's like too easy, but I love the Diamondbacks over in 2023.
One of DeBundo's favorite plays for futures. And I will mention what you said in your article, because you said you wouldn't go any higher than 75.5, and it's at 75.5 now at BetMGM. So that's good to know. Okay. I thought you had something else to say. I'm
just excited. I mean, it's going to be, it's fun, Snakes baseball, Christian Walker from my town too. He had an incredible season last year, really like a late career breakout for him. Always been great with the glove, hitting 30 plus bombs in the middle of that lineup. Pretty good. So I'm excited. They did add some, a little bit of bat stuff, Lord Gurriel could be interesting. Ketel Marte, a decent bounce back candidate. So like the lineup's not terrible. And Carroll and McCarthy with the speed at the top is just, it's going to be fun.
I know we're going to sound like broken records too, because we've talked about the schedule changes. The other thing for Arizona, you don't have to face the Padres and the Dodgers as often as you normally would. So that bodes well. Zerillo, we'll let you get in on this conversation. It seems to me, based on your write-up and your projections on Arizona, you're not quite sold yet on these younger pitchers. You might need to see a little bit more, the ones DeBundo spoke about. And Madison Bumgarner, the Diamondbacks don't have enough flexibility to make tweaks and get more established prime pitchers at the top. You're not all that into Bumgarner and these young guys quite yet.
Yeah, it's more so that they're just going to be stuck giving innings to Bumgarner and Davies. I would rather the pitchers that Anthony talked about, like Fott, like Jameson, like Ryan Nelson, be getting these innings, getting developmental innings at the major league level and giving them upside innings at the major league level. I know what Madison Bumgarner is. I know what Zach Davies is at this stage of their careers. There's not much upside there, and that is what is ultimately going to drag them back down and drags their projection back down below 500. I would lean to the over here. I love everything Anthony said about defense. Their speed in the outfield is tremendous. Alec Thomas is the slowest of the three outfielders, and he's the best defender in center field. So they have a very dynamic team. Nick Ahmed missed almost all of last year. When healthy, he's one of the best defensive shortstops in baseball. I do think they're a year away from making that jump. I don't think they're going to make a wild card run this year, but I do think this is always the fun year before it starts to get serious that a lot of organizations go through, where you can see the turnover into the competitive team that it's about to become, because all the prospects are starting to hit the majors at the same time. I think the key for them is going to be once Jordan Lawler unseats Nick Ahmed at shortstop. That might be next year. Really good defender, a lot of power. He's just going to hit for a very low average, but he's going to do some exciting things at shortstop. And a lot of people like Lawler, but he is sort of your indicator that they are ready to compete. Once he comes up, I would imagine next offseason, they have not spent money in a while. Next offseason, they might finally invest a little bit of money into this team, a little bit of money into that bullpen, and this team might start to ascend with the pitching depth and the prospects it has. So I do like where they're headed. I just think for this year, they're stuck giving some innings to some guys I do not love on the pitching staff.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to make the case that Bumgarner's good. That's not for sure. But he was a mid-level back-end starter last year. He was capable at times.
Strom is the best position coach in baseball. Their pitching coach came over from the Astros, and you saw immediately the entire pitching staff take off. So,
yeah, Merrill Kelly. And one interesting thing, the bullpen was horrifying last year, and that was the reason they lost a lot of games. They were actually, per Bet Labs, one of the most profitable F5 teams in the whole league. Now, they haven't done anything, like Zerillo said. They haven't really improved the bullpen whatsoever. but just random variance, and you find a random guy here or there, and your bullpen probably regresses back toward league average. That's just naturally what happens with bullpens. And so I don't think they're going to be a bottom 3 bullpen again. If they're just like a bottom 10 bullpen, that's a few wins right there that they, blew last season. Every game, it felt like the 7th inning was when the Gallen would go in, shove for 7 innings. They'd be up 2-1, and then 2-run homer off Melanson, 3-2 loss. Like that happened way too much last year.
And the proper way to develop the guys, I mean, this is what the Cardinals would do to develop the guys like Jameson, like Fott, is you take them and put them in your bullpen and you make them firemen, and you let them go through the lineup once and you give them a few days off, and you manage their innings by letting them go through a lineup 3 innings at a time instead of starting them and making them go 5 or 6 innings. And eventually you stretch them out and you have them for the end of the year. That's something that an organization like the Cardinals has done for years and years and years. If they really want to compete this year, that's something they should do with their bullpen.
All right.
One more thing.
Lastly,
I got one more thing.
Okay.
I'm waiting to actually bet it to see what we're going to get more tea leaves on whether he's going to make the opening day rotation. But even if they don't go with this youth movement, they're going to have one spot available. It's, Gallen, Kelly, Bumgarner, Davies. The 5th spot is open. If Brandon Pfaadt is going to be the 5th guy, I will have a Cy Young future, or excuse me, Rookie of the Year future on him. You can find, I think, 65, 70 to 1. If the innings are there, if he gets the spot, he can pitch the innings. And I think he has the stuff to really break out and wow people. I know it's a competitive field. I know pitchers rarely win, but this is a dart. We're talking about long range here. I'm waiting a little bit more on the news to see what we get out of Diamondbacks camp, but looking to play Pfaadt for Rookie of the Year.
Okay. And lastly, the Colorado Rockies, one of the teams that has one of the fewest win total projections across the board. When you look around, the Rockies over at Pacoda, 64.5. They're down there with like Washington and Oakland and the Royals. Anywho, the Rockies win total on BetMGM is 65.5. Last year, they won 68 games. They barely hit their win total under of 69.5 wins. Didn't see much from either of you on this team when it came to the preview or any best bets or anything you liked. I mean, whenever you guys give something out, I know it's a best bet, but nothing you really that jumped out to you, Zerillo. I mean, I guess what I would like to ask about the Rockies is maybe teams that play the Rockies at Coors Field. It's a way for us to talk about the ballpark, which is always a fun discussion because of the all the runs that are scored there. But what do you got for thoughts on the Rockies before we wrap this up?
If I remember correctly, their bullpen was actually pretty decent last year, and they ended up locking down a lot of games that seemed like they were headed over early, and that was very annoying. They got nothing from Chris Bryant last year. Full season from Chris Bryant maybe changes their outlook, gives them a little bit of a boost. They only got 40 games from him. Still don't know really why they signed him after refusing to sign Trevor Story. Wasn't there some Chris Bryant like MVP hype for them, like for a little bit last year? I don't remember if he started
early in the season.
Yeah, it's possible he might have started out hot and then got injured because he finished with like a decent line for the 40 games he played, but I don't remember which portions of the season he actually played in. But yeah, I mean, my projection dropped by 4.5 wins. Their win total dropped by 4 wins. I was no bet last year. It's no bet for me this year. Pretty much all the projections are right in line with their total. So it's a pass on the Rockies, a team like the Royals, who I feel like I never have any particularly positive or negative things to say. I actually did bet the Rockies under 69.5 last year, now that I come to think of it. So it dropped this year. It's a pass for me.
Okay. Very to the point, Sean Zerillo. DeBundo, I think this was the your least favorite team you wanted to talk about? Like
least interesting. Yeah. I'd rather watch the A's because like they have fun young pitchers and some interesting prospects that are going to play. Zico Tovar is fun. Looks like he's going to be the everyday shortstop for the Rockies. Brendan Rodgers is hurt already. The starting pitching, German Marquez used to be one of my favorite pitchers in baseball, but his stuff has dropped and his numbers have gone the very wrong direction in the last a few years. And so the last really year and a half since the pandemic, he's really fallen off. Charlie Blackmon is old. CJ Cron will be a fun Dinger Tuesday pick. We'll probably have him if FanDuel's cut that. We'll probably have him if Dinger Tuesdays are back, but it's really hard to make a case for them why you should watch the Rockies. I mean, Michael Toglia maybe comes up. He's interesting, sort of. They don't really have any future direction. I would almost bet the under just to hate watch them this year, just because I think that they are everything that's wrong with baseball right now. They're not doing analytics. They're not, paying players as much as they're deserved. Their only offseason real addition was Daniel Bard, who had a great season, but I wouldn't bank on that again. I wouldn't bank on that again at Coors. And so the bullpen probably regresses. They're probably worse. Bryant might stay healthy, but given his age and history, probably won't. So I'm out on the Rockies in all shapes and forms. And now that I'm, going through this diatribe, I may go place an under just to spite them.
It's funny. I'm reading Zerillo's projections from last year, entering the 2022 season. Any under wager on the Rockies correlates to my over wager on Arizona. So it's like you're taking that sentence from Zerillo and putting it into action. And yes, Zerillo, you took them under 70 wins last year. And you said you'd ponder at 69.5. And obviously, looking at the number now, we're not anywhere near that with this team.
Was it last year or 2 years ago where they had that insane home record where they won like they won like 11 games on the road all season?
2 years ago.
Yep. 2 years ago.
Yep. And their win total right now at BetMGM 65.5. Okay, before we go, Zerillo, I think you may have had, I know you talked about the Giants, the Padres quite a bit on their NL West future pennant World Series. I think you had a couple of stat leader ones you wanted to give out. Soto, Mookie Betts. I'm not sure we got to those.
Yeah. For most runs, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. I still think the Dodgers will score runs. I'm just low on their pitching relative to previous years. Betts on a per plate appearance basis is the best run scorer in all of baseball. He's a phenomenal base runner, advances from first to third better than anybody else. He projects so well for run scoring. So even though he is amongst the favorites for runs leader, 11-1, I still like Mookie Betts. 18-1, Freddie Freeman, a lot of similar reasons. But the Padres are my favorite bet in the division, obviously for divisional odds pennant. But the things that correlate to that would be Juan Soto. And Juan Soto 2 years ago was around plus 750 to win MVP. Last year, he was plus 300 and the favorite. He projects just as well this year as he projected last year relative to his peers in the National League. The closest players to him in terms of production per plate appearance are Will Smith, the Dodgers catcher, and Fernando Tatis Jr., his teammate, who's going to miss 20 games and largely won't be able to compete with him for the award. So Juan Soto, some concerns about athleticism, injuries last year. His plate discipline is otherworldly, though, and I do expect a power breakout coming at some point. He's 50-1 for home run leader. I think that's interesting. I just expect him to get on base a lot. And Manny Machado at 25-1 to be the RBI leader and constantly driving Soto in, I think is a solid bet as well. So those stat leader bets, awards bets on the Padres. And I think looking at Soto's odds for the MVP market relative to where he was last year, it's absolutely a buy at 6-1. It was a sell at 3-1, but I'm back in at the current price.
All right. I think that's it. Dabundo, anything else? You good?
Not much. I hope Soto swings more. He's almost too good of a hitter. I told this to Zerillo, like if he walked like 3% less and just went for more power, I think he'd be that's when you'll see the leap that the projections suggest could happen, where he just like goes bonds for a year. I think it's very possible.
And that's the kind of guys I want to bet on for home run leader. We all know the talent is there. We see how hard he hits the ball. We know how smart he is about what he swings at. I bet Vlad Guerrero Jr. at 50-1 2 years ago, the projections would not have recommended him as a home run leader bet. But sometimes you just bet on the talent in that market at those prices because you know that great players can make drastic changes and start hitting the ball in the air more. So he's always hit into too many ground balls. Maybe we just see a different Juan Soto with a new team at some point.
Okay. I think Dabundo also, when you were explaining Zerillo, was betting that Rockies under. So that could be what.
Yep. And I'm thinking about the snakes over. I really want to bet it. I really do. if you could guarantee me Bumgarner's not getting more than like 12 starts, Davies isn't getting more than 15 starts, I would be in. But I'm worried they get full seasons just because they want to pay the guys, and make them work for what they're paying them.
All right. However you found this podcast, everybody, you can find the rest of our MLB division betting previews, division by division breakdown on the Payoff Pitch podcast. We are Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. For Anthony DeBundo, Sean Zerillo, Brendan Glasheen. Look forward to more. Thanks for listening.